Hello again everybody, welcome back to Test Flight in the BF-109 K-4. I'm on to the next mission in the challenge campaign and it's an easy takeoff. That sounds exactly what I need, is the easy version of the takeoff. So we're going to start this on the runway. Let me get into the cockpit and we'll get this thing going. Okay, we'll pick things up back on the ground in Napa. We're actually at the exact same place where we ended the last mission, so that's working out very well. Although I do want to go back at some point and redo the startup, just to run through it one more time for proficiency and to make one small correction. Well, one correction so far. The only thing that I've noticed is that I misinterpreted what it was telling me during the run-up check about the fuel pumps. I read it to mean that you check for fluctuations in fuel pressure with it in the P1 and the P2 position. What it actually meant was you check it for a while in the P1 position, and then you check it for a while in the P2 position, and not in the P1, P2 like I thought. So that's the only thing so far that I really want to go back and clean up. Everything else I'm happy with and can get through very, very quickly. Now, let me go ahead and pull up the kneeboard and we'll go through the takeoff procedure here. And we'll also cover some systems once we get into the air and start to dig into the manual and really figure out how to run this aircraft. Okay, so for shorter runways, it says I can lower the flaps to 20 degrees. I have plenty of runway on this one, so I'm going to leave the flaps retracted. And I'll definitely try this again at some point with the flaps lowered and with the drop tank as well to feel how it feels in the different configurations. Now, horizontal stabilizer trim set to 1 degree. So let's go down here. I've got the wheel mapped and I'm going to go it's a little bit nose down. I'm going to take it down to 1 degree. And that's fine. Now, turn the governor automation switch to the lower automatic position. That should be verified. Yes, automatic. And if I do need to do a manual prop pitch control on the takeoff, I can do so by putting the prop pitch indicator to the 12 o'clock position using the manual control. I'll try that again. I'll try that also at some point, I'm sure. Now, radiator control to automatic, verified automatic. Okay, and they seem to be, yeah, from the cockpit they look to be fairly well open right now. So, yeah, you can see the water temperature is very, very low. So I could actually, I need to probably get some RPMs on the aircraft to bring that back up, but that's fine. I think there was a lower limit that I was looking for of, well, I'll read ahead, maybe it'll tell me. Okay, set the radiator to automatic, got it. Ensure oil temperature is at least 30 degrees Celsius. Now the oil temperature, and I'll zoom in slightly on these instruments. Okay, so the tick right there is at 30, so I'm just basically making sure the temperature is between the two tick marks on my oil temperature gauge. Oil pressure 3.5, so again, just making sure everything here is within the tick marks, and everything is except for the water, which is no big deal. Just for the heck of it, let me close the radiator manually, and I'll get that to come back up. I'm not worried about it, but then again, I would kind of like it up there into the range that I was expecting. Now then, let's go gently increase throttle, and I'll read through the rest just to make sure I don't miss anything as I'm doing it. Gently increase to the takeoff position, 1.35. on my manifold pressure needle, so there's 1.3, so about halfway between these two ticks is what I'll have that going to. Tachometer is going to go to 2300 to 2450. That'll happen automatically for me because I have my prop pitch and rotor RPM controls set to automatic. And for shorter runways, use the MW boost and higher boost settings instead of the 1.8, or as needed, 1.8 on my manifold pressure gauge, or maxed out on the manifold pressure gauge. Now, I don't know if I've covered this or not, or so far in this series, but I have the capability to provide increased performance, greatly increased performance to the engine by enabling a water methanol mixture to be injected. It's controlled by one of these two switches. They're not labeled, but okay, wing cannons, MW50 boost. It's controlled by this switch. Right is on, left is off. So it's going to happen automatically. Once I increase the throttle past a certain point, the boost is going to kick in. I'll get the pressure indicator right here on the boost pressure indicator, and it's going to increase my manifold pressure. But I'll get to that once we get into some more systems and maybe look at that in some more detail, although I think I covered everything right there. Okay, proceed with takeoff, retract the gear immediately, and use the gear controls to retract. Okay, so that's just press the button. Okay, so I press the button right here, the one that's labeled I, and it looks like it has a little switch guard over it. Okay, I'll leave it guarded for now, and then I'll reach down and grab that after takeoff. Ensure red light illuminates to indicate gear up, and there'll be 2 green for down and locked, 1 red for up and locked. And I've got malfunction procedures that are going to tell me that if I have a malfunction and I can't get the gear to retract, I may just, well, it says just press the button again if it doesn't work. Okay, that's a good procedure. And then set the supercharger pressure to 1.25 for a cruise and climb out. Okay, flaps I'm not going to worry about since I don't have them down. And use the horizontal trim stabilizer hand wheel to just manage trim on the way up. Okay, that's good. Once I get into the air, I'll pick it back up with the climb procedures, and then we'll dig into the manual and look at some systems and then put her back down on the ground. Okay, so let me stow the checklist for now. And I'll talk a little bit about, I suppose, technique, as I'm going to put my radiator controls back to the automatic position, as it doesn't seem to be doing anything. The temperature will come up as I get going. It's no sweat. Now, the technique I'm going to use, and believe me, there's no right or wrong way to do this. This will be, I don't know, maybe my 7th or 8th takeoff attempt in a World War II DCS aircraft. It's hard. It's hard, and you can read everything there is to read about it, but until you really get in there and kind of do it a few times for yourself, the key is to just think about what's going on with the aircraft and think about the different forces that are on the aircraft. Now, you've of course got your propeller blade that is going to be pulling you generally to the left just due to torque, gyroscopic forces, and so forth off the propeller. Now you're going to have your tail wheel that is locked, that is going to keep you moving fairly straight down the runway. As long as that's effective, you're going to have your rudder and your horizontal tail aerodynamically keeping you aligned, and you're also going to have your aileron control that you'll be able to use during the takeoff roll to keep you from tipping over right or left. And as you go through the different speed regimes, you're going to have different forces acting in different ways on the aircraft. But generally what's going to happen is once you get enough speed going, your nose is going to start to come down, and once the nose comes down, your tail wheel is going to come up, and without that tail wheel keeping you aligned with the runway, you're going to naturally tend to roll to the left and pull to the left. So you need to counteract it with some right rudder and some right stick, and just allow the aircraft to fly itself off of the runway. Now, I can say it over and over and over. You can read different techniques over and over and over. I guess the advice that I would give you is don't necessarily believe what I'm telling you here. See it in action for yourself. Find a technique that works for you, and there are some different techniques that you can get into. This is just the one that I found that works for me, and it just takes practice. It's not going to be perfect when I execute it here, so it just takes practice. And it takes feel, because we don't have any feel. A real pilot would have, you hear the term seat of your pants flying. That's where, that's how you get a feel for what the aircraft is doing. That's where your body contacts the aircraft, and you can feel if you're pulling to the left, pulling to the right, rolling left, rolling right, feel the G-forces, feel the different forces, and that's what we're lacking here. That's the biggest problem when it comes to a complex procedure like this, or an operation where there are a lot of things going on the aircraft. We can see it, but sometimes our eyes can deceive us. So I guess, long story short on this, try the different techniques, but trust what works for you, and don't get frustrated with it. That's the biggest thing that I want to pass along here, is don't let this frustrate you. If you need to go back to some of the easier flight model settings, like the rudder assists or whatever you need, there's nothing wrong with that. That's where I started. That's where all the experienced folks started, was in aircraft that were nothing like this. So don't think badly of yourself if you completely botch it, which I might be about to do right here. Okay, so the technique I'm going to use, and I've got the indicator up here so you can see my stick position and also see my rudder position down at the bottom. Now, technique I'm going to use, I'm going to start with full right deflection and slightly aft. I'm going to slowly, steadily increase the throttle to 1.3, and I'm just going to control the path down the runway using rudder as much as I can, but blending in also a little bit of differential braking. Now, once the nose starts to come up, I just need to let it, and just let it fly off the runway. Don't stall it like I did just then. That's a challenge in and of itself. Now, 200, let's go gear up, and I'm just controlling the aircraft and watching two fly by me. But I think overall it's just understanding the forces that are acting on the aircraft right there. The biggest mistake that I always make in these is stalling the aircraft immediately after after the aerodynamic forces really start to work on the aircraft. So you have to be careful not to over-rotate like I just did back there, and just let the aircraft naturally fly itself off the runway. And it might take actually a little bit of forward stick to counteract that a little bit, so that you don't get too much of a climb rate and too much AOA, angle of attack, on the aircraft immediately after takeoff. So that's all I know about takeoff right there. I don't know much, as you see, as you just saw, but hopefully that part of it did help you in some way. So let's go ahead and get back into the manual real quick and get into the climb out. Now, maintain a shallow climb until reaching 270. We are already back past that. Now, increase climb angle and maintain 270 kilometers per hour throughout the climb. Now, I'm supposed to have... Okay, here we go. Cruise parameters with climb and combat power. So for climb power, I was supposed to maintain a little under 1.3, I think. So just maintain right about there, and maintain 270, and that's going to give you the optimum climb. So as the nose comes up, airspeed's going to bleed off, and it's just going to be balancing between climb angle and airspeed. Once we get up, and using the horizontal stabilizer trim, I'm going to go ahead and trim it nose down and then nose up. And hey, thanks, good job. I may end the mission. I'm going to press on here though, and just make some circles around the airfield out here over the water. Okay, so yeah, right out there, about 270. Now I just want to bring the nose back down, and just using the horizontal stabilizer trim controls, just maintain about 270, and that's going to give me optimum climb out and optimum performance out of the aircraft. Now, it's possible here that I missed. Let me go back in the manual real quick. I know there's a chart that gives these engine supercharger pressure settings for different phases of flight. I'll be right back. Okay, got it. Now we have different operating ranges for the different phases of flight. Now in combat, I can go up to 1.35 on the manifold pressure gauge, and I'll do that real quick just to have a look at the effects. Now, manifold pressure is right there, 1.35. RPM comes up with that, and temperatures. I can see my water temperature is starting to get pegged. Now I've got automatic radiator flap controls. So that's going to stabilize right there automatically. I just need to make sure that it doesn't get above the tick mark. I need to really pay attention to that, because it looks like it's still creeping up, but I think it's holding in there. Okay, so that's that setting. And on the throttle, physically on my throttle, on my Warthog, the throttle is just stood up. It's just straight up and down. It's about, well, exactly halfway to fully open. You can see on the throttle right here, I mean, it's just to the... It's not even halfway to being fully open. So, okay, so that's... Okay, I'm just kind of getting a feel for where that's at, so that I don't have to necessarily look at the gauge to judge that. I can just kind of go off of throttle feel and go off of just what I hear from the sounds. Eventually, not yet though. So, okay, so that's how the combat setting feels. Now cruise and climb, that comes back to 1.25. So right there, just above 1.2, between 1.2 and 1.3. Now that was just a little bit in, maybe just a quarter of an inch on my real throttle that it came in just then. So you see RPM comes down and temperature is coming down. It's really starting to stabilize for the water temperature. Oil temperature never really increased dramatically off of whatever it's at right now, 100. Okay, so that's the cruise setting. Now I have down here, during climb, boost pressure may be regulated a further 0.03 ATA between 1.31 and 1.39. So on the climb out, I can go, well, I can pretty much just go for the combat setting as long as I don't overdo it. Because wherever I'm going to climb to, I'm going to be there within that time limit of 30 minutes in either case. So I don't know why it just didn't say climb, use 1.35, but yeah, close enough. That'll work. Now I'll pull it back to economy. So I've got up to my cruising altitude, and I just want to go max conservation on the fuel. I go for 1.05. So just above the 1.5. Or actually no, just above the 1.0. Wow, that's way back there. Okay. It actually at this altitude does not go back to that. My throttle's all the way in, and at this altitude it just does not go down to 1.05 on the manifold pressure. So what is my altitude? Up almost 5,000, 4,600 meters. I wish I had my little conversion table here. So 4,600 meters, what's that about? About 14,000 feet, 15,000 feet? That seems about right. Well, surefire way to find out. Let me go to the external real quick. Yeah, 14,220 feet is what I was at just then. Okay, so let me just bring it on around here. Now, trim characteristics of the aircraft I have right now. Okay, I'm going to go just a touch of nose up, so I am right back where I started, just about 1 degree on the horizontal stabilizer trim, and that's at 300 kilometers per hour indicated. Okay, so I need to go just a little bit of left rudder to maintain coordinated flight here, and it's just going to stabilize right there, a little bit of nose down trim. And with the trim, the only cockpit control that I have is for the horizontal stabilizer, pitch up and down. I've got nothing for roll left, roll right, or for the rudder, so if I just release the rudder, it just naturally tends to roll to the right. I think that's going to get better with a little bit more airspeed, so I think that's kind of how it's calibrated. It's calibrated to give you good trim. Yeah, like right there, that's perfect. Well, it was until I dropped a little bit of speed, so I think it's calibrated for somewhere between 200 and 300 on the airspeed. Calibrated just for what you would use for normal, like a cruise, max performance cruise, which makes sense. That's where you would spend the majority of your flight at. Now, up here at this altitude, let me start to think about oxygen real quick. This would be the first good system to look at. Now, let me, of course, enable the oxygen system and get some pressure on that. And let me set up for a good trim. I'll just try to get it so it's going to hold me, just hold me in some sort of a turn up here. So let me go for about 250. As far as airspeed, trim nose up, just a touch. I'm not worried about maintaining coordinated flight right now. I'm just kind of going for like a really coarse course, as in COARSE, not a fine alignment here. And I think right there, a little bit of throttle. Well, it's going to be hard to find the perfect setting that's going to just keep me perfectly hands off here. I don't think I'm going to find it. But yeah, oxygen system. Let me read up on that in the manual a little bit, and I'll be right back.